Hello, eighth graders, and welcome. We are going to be finishing up the second half of Act 1, Scene 3 today. We have just finished the part of the story where Mr. and Mrs. Von Don are having an argument due to the fact that Mr. Von Don is smoking away all of their money by constantly having Meep buy him cigarettes. Um, this was a pretty important part of the story because Anne mentions that she has never seen grown-ups quarrel before. This again shows us how wonderful of a relationship her mother and father have. They have never fought in front of their children. So after the fight, we are going to continue on, and Mrs. Frank is just kind of trying to make things seem like normal, right? Mrs. Frank is a character that definitely tries her best to avoid conflict. So we'll go ahead and get started right here. Anne, will you give me my knitting? I must remember when Meep comes to ask her to bring me some more wool. I need some hairpins and some soap. I made a list. Have you some library books for Meep when she comes? It's a wonder that Meep has a life of her own, the way we make her run errands for us. Please, Meep, get me some starch. Please take my hair out and have it cut. Tell me all the latest news, Meep. Anne goes over, kneeling on the couch beside Mrs. Von Don. Did you know she was engaged? His name is Dirk, and Meep's afraid the Nazis will ship him off to Germany to work in one of their war plants. That's what they're doing with some of the young Dutchmen. They pick them up off the streets. Don't you ever get tired of talking? Suppose you try keeping still for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. He starts to pace again. Again, Anne follows him, mimicking him. Mrs. Frank jumps up and takes her by the arm up to the sink and gives her a glass of milk. Come here, Anne. It's time for your glass of milk. Talk, talk, talk. I never heard such a child. Where is my... Every evening it's the same. Talk, talk, talk. Where is my... What are you looking for? My pipe. Have you seen my pipe? Huh, what good's a pipe? You haven't got any tobacco. At least I'll have something to hold in my mouth. Margot, have you seen my pipe? It was on the table last night. Anne puts her glass of milk on the table and picks up his pipe, hiding it behind her back. I know. Anne, did you see my pipe? Anne! Anne, Mr. Von Don is speaking to you. Am I allowed to talk now? You're the most aggravating. The trouble with you is you've been spoiled. What you need is a good old-fashioned spanking. Remember, Mr. So-and-so, remember, I'm a lady. Anne puts the pipe into his mouth and then picks up her glass of milk. Why aren't you nice and quiet like your sister Margot? Why do you have to show off all the time? Let me give you a little advice, young lady. Men don't like that kind of thing in a girl. You know that? A man likes a girl who will listen to him once in a while. A domestic girl who will keep the house shining for her husband, who loves to cook and sew and... I'd cut my throat first. I'd open my veins. I'm going to be remarkable. I'm going to Paris. Paris. To study music and art. Yeah. I'm going to be a famous dancer or singer or something wonderful. Anne makes a wide gesture, spilling the glass of milk on the fur coat in Mrs. Von Don's lap. Margot rushes quickly over with a towel, and Anne tries to brush the milk off of her skirt. Now look what you've done, you clumsy little fool. My beautiful fur coat my father gave me. I'm so sorry. What do you care? It isn't yours, so go on, ruin it. Do you know what that coat cost? Do you? And now look at it, look at it. I'm very, very sorry. I could kill you for this. I could just kill you. Mrs. Von Don goes up the stairs, clutching the coat. Mr. Von Don starts after her. Petronella, Leafy, Leafy, come back, the supper, come back. Anne, you must not behave in that way. It was an accident. Anyone can have an accident. I don't mean that. I mean the answering back. You must not answer back. They are our guests. We must always show the greatest courtesy to them. We're all living under terrible tension. That's why we must control ourselves. You don't hear Margot getting into arguments with them, do you? Watch Margot. She's always courteous with them, never familiar. She keeps her distance, and they respect her for it. Try to be like Margot. And have them walk all over me, the way they do her? No thanks. I'm not trying that anyone is going to walk all over you, Anne. I'm afraid the other people that you'll walk on them. I don't know what happens to you, Anne. You are wild, self-willed. If I had ever talked to my mother the way as you talk to me, things have changed. People aren't like that anymore. Yes, Mother. No, Mother. Anything you say, Mother. I've got to fight things out for myself. Make something of myself. It isn't necessary to fight to do it. Margot doesn't fight, and isn't she? Margot, Margot, Margot. That's all I hear from anyone. How wonderful Margot is. Why aren't you more like Margot? Oh, come on, Anne. Don't be so. Everything she does is right, and everything I do is wrong. I'm the goat around here. You're all against me, and you worst of all. Anne rushes off into her room and throws herself down on the settee, stifling her sobs. Mrs. Frank sighs and starts toward the stove. Let's put the soup on the stove, if there's anyone who cares to eat. Margot, will you take the bread out? I don't know how we can go on living this way. I can't say a word to Anne. She flies at me. You know, Anne, in half an hour she'll be out here laughing and joking. And I told your father it wouldn't work. But no, he had to ask them. He said he owed it to him. He said, well, he knows now that I was right. These quarrels, this bickering. Shush, shush. The buzzer for the door sounds and Mrs. Frank gasps, startled. Every time I hear that sound, my heart stops. It's Miep. Father! Mr. Frank comes quickly from Peter's room. Thank you, Margot, as he goes down the steps to open the outer door. Has everyone his list? I'll get my books. Here's your list. Margot goes into her room and Anne's bedroom on the right. Anne sits up, hiding her tears as Margot comes in. Miep's here. Margot picks up her books and goes back. Anne hurries over to the mirror, smoothing her hair. Is it Miep? Yes. Father's gone down to let her in. At last I'll have some cigarettes. I can't tell you how unhappy I am about Mrs. Von Don's coat. Anne should have never touched it. She'll be all right. Is there anything I can do? Don't worry. He turns to sweet Miep, but it is not Miep who comes up the steps. It is Mr. Crayler, followed by Mr. Frank. Their faces are grave. Anne comes into the bedroom, and Peter comes from his room. Okay, so what does it mean for their faces to be grave? This is probably not a good thing, right? So to be grave is an adjective. It is to have a look of somberness, a very serious look on their faces. Mr. Crayler! How are you, Mr. Crayler? This is a surprise. When Mr. Crayler comes, the sun begins to shine. Miep is coming? Not tonight. Crayler goes to Margot and Mrs. Frank and Anne, shaking hands with them. Wouldn't you like a cup of coffee, or better still, will you have supper with us? Mr. Crayler has something to talk over with us. Something has happened, he says, which demands an immediate decision. What is it? Mr. Crayler sits down on the couch as he talks. He takes bread, cabbages, milk, etc. from his briefcase, giving them to Margot and Anne to put away. Usually when I come up here, I try to bring some bit of good news. What's the use of telling you the bad news when there's nothing that you can do about it? But today something has happened. Dirk, Meeps Dirk, came to me just now. He tells me that he has a Jewish friend living near him, a dentist. He says he's in trouble. He begged me. Could I do anything for this man? Could I find him a hiding place? So I've come to you. I know it's a terrible thing to ask of you, living as you are, but would you take him in with you? Oh, of course we will. It'll be just for a night or two until I find some other place. This happened so suddenly that I didn't know where to turn. Where is he? He's downstairs in the office. Good. Bring him up. His name is Dussel. Jan Dussel. Dussel. I think I know him. I'll get him. He goes quickly down the steps and out. Mr. Frank suddenly becomes conscious of the others. Forgive me, I spoke without consulting you, but I knew you'd feel as I do. There's no reason for you to consult anyone. This is your place. You have a right to do exactly as you please. The only thing I feel, there's so little food as it is, and to take in another person. Peter turns away, ashamed of his father. We can stretch the food a little. It's only for a few days. You want to make a bet? I think it's fine to have him, but Otto, where are you going to put him? Where? He can have my bed. I can sleep on the floor. I wouldn't mind. That's good of you, Peter, but your room's too small, even for you. I have a much better idea. I'll come in here with you and Mother, and Margot can take Peter's room, and Peter can go in our room with Mr. Dussel. That's right. We could do that. No, Margot, you mustn't sleep in that room. Neither you nor Anne. Moushy has caught some rats in there. Peter's brave. He doesn't mind. Then how about this? I'll come in here with you and Mother, and Mr. Dussel can have my bed. No, no, no. Margot will come in here with us, and he can have her bed. It's the only way. Margot, bring your things in here. Help her, Anne. Why, Margot? Why can't I come in here? Because it wouldn't be proper for Margot to sleep with a... Please, Anne, don't argue. Please. Anne starts away slowly. You don't mind sharing your room with Mr. Dussel, do you, Anne? No. No, of course not. Good. Anne goes off into her bedroom helping Margot, and Mr. Frank starts to search in the cupboards. Where's the cognac? All right, guys, so cognac is a form of whiskey, and he's getting this out as a means of celebration. It's there, but Otto, I was saving it in case of illness. I think we couldn't find a better time to use it. Peter, will you get 5 glasses for me? Peter goes for the glasses, and Margot comes out of her bedroom carrying her possessions, which she hangs behind a curtain in the main room. Mr. Frank finds the cognac and pours it into the 5 glasses that Peter brings him. Mr. Von Don stands looking on sourly. Mrs. Von Don comes downstairs and looks around at all the bustle. What's happening? What's going on? Someone's moving in with us. In here? You're joking. It's only for a night or two, until Mr. Crayler finds him another place. Yeah. Mr. Frank hurries over as Mr. Crayler and Mr. Dussel come up. Dussel is a man in his late 50s, meticulous, finicky, bewildered now. He wears a raincoat. He carries a briefcase, stuffed full, and a small medicine case. Come in, Mr. Dussel. This is Mr. Frank. Mr. Otto Frank? Yes, let me take your things. This is my wife Edith, Mr. and Mrs. Von Don, their son Peter, and my daughters Margot and Anne. Thank you, Mr. Frank. Thank you all, Mr. Dussel. I leave you in good hands. Oh, Dirk's coat. Dussel hurriedly takes off the raincoat, giving it to Mr. Crayler. Underneath is his white dentist jacket, with a yellow Star of David on it. What can I say to you? Say to thank you? Mr. Crayler and Meep They're our lifeline. Without them, we couldn't live. Please, please. You make us seem very heroic. It isn't that at all. We simply don't like the Nazis. Mr. Frank offers him a drink. No thanks. We don't like their methods. We don't like. I know, I know. No one's going to tell us Dutchmen what to do with our Jews. Pay no attention to Mr. Frank. I'll be up tomorrow to see that they're treating you right. Don't trouble to come down again. Peter will bolt the door after me, won't you, Peter? Yes, sir. Thank you, Peter. I'll do it. Good night. Good night. Good night, Mr. Crayler. We'll see you tomorrow. Mr. Crayler goes out with Mr. Frank, and Mrs. Frank gives each one of the grown-ups a glass of cognac. Please, Mr. Dussel, sit down. I'm dreaming. I know it. I can't believe my eyes. Mr. Otto Frank, here. You're not in Switzerland, then? A woman told me. She said she'd gone to your house. The door was open. Everything was in disorder. Dishes in the sink. She said she found a piece of paper in the wastebasket with an address scribbled on it. An address in Zurich. She said that you must have escaped to Zurich. Father put that there purposely, just so people would think that very thing. And you've been here all the time? All the time, ever since July. It worked, Pem. The address you left. Mr. Dussel says that people believe we escaped to Switzerland. I'm glad, and now let's have a little drink to welcome Mr. Dussel. Before they can drink, Mr. Dussel bolts his drink. Mr. Frank smiles and raises his glass. To Mr. Dussel, welcome. We're very honored to have you with us. To Mr. Dussel, welcome. The Von Dons murmur a welcome, and the grown-ups drink. That was good. Did Mr. Crayler warn you that you won't get much to eat around here? You can imagine. 3 ration books among the 7 of us, and now you make 8. Peter walks away humiliated. Outside, a street organ is heard dimly. Mr. Von Don, you don't realize what is happening outside that you should warn me of a thing like that. You don't realize what's going on. As Mr. Von Don starts his characteristic pacing, Dussel turns to speak to the others. Right here in Amsterdam, every day, hundreds of Jews disappear. They surround a block and search house by house. Children come home from school to find their parents gone. Hundreds are being deported. People that you and I know. The Hallensteins, the Wessels. Oh, no, no. They get their call-up notice. Come to the Jewish theater on such and such a day and hour. Bring only what you can carry in a rucksack. And if you refuse the call-up notice, then they come up and drag you from your home and ship you off to Mauthausen, the death camp. We didn't know that things had gotten so much worse. Forgive me for speaking so. Do you know the de Walls? What's become of them? Their daughter Jopi and I are in the same class. Jopi's my best friend. They are gone. Gone? With all the others. Oh, no, not Jopi. She turns away in tears, and Mrs. Frank motions to Margot to comfort her. Margot goes to Anne, putting her arms comfortingly around her. There were some people called Wagner. They live near us. I think we should put this off until later. We all have many questions we want to ask, but I'm sure that Mr. Dussel would like to get settled before supper. Thank you, I would. I brought very little with me. I'm sorry we can't give you a room alone, but I hope you won't be too uncomfortable. We've had to make strict rules here, a schedule of hours. We'll tell you after supper. Anne, would you take Mr. Dussel to his room? If you'll come with me, Mr. Dussel. Forgive me if I haven't really expressed my gratitude to all of you. This has all been such a shock to me. I'd always thought of myself as Dutch. I was born in Holland. My father was born in Holland. And my grandfather. And now, after all these years, if you'll excuse me. Dussel gives a little bow and hurries off after Anne. Mr. Frank and the others are subdued. Well, here we are. Dussel looks around the room. In the main room, Margot speaks to her mother. The news sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? It's so different from what Mr. Crayler tells us. Mr. Crayler says things are improving. I like it better the way Mr. Crayler tells it. They resume their occupations quietly, and Peter goes off into his room. In Anne's room, Anne turns to Dussel. You are going to share this room with me. I'm a man who's always lived alone. I haven't had to adjust myself to others. I hope you'll bear with me until I learn. Let me help you. Do you always live alone? Have you no family at all? No one. He opens his medicine case and spreads his bottles on the dressing table. How dreadful. You must be terribly lonely. I'm used to it. I don't think I could ever get used to it. Didn't you ever have a pet, a cat or a dog? I have an allergy for fur-bearing animals. They give me asthma. Oh dear. Peter has a cat. Here? He has it here? Yes, but we hardly ever see it. He keeps it in his room all the time. I'm sure it'll be all right. Let us hope so. He takes some pills to fortify himself. That's Margot's bed where you're going to sleep. I sleep on the sofa there. We cleared these off for your things. The best part about this room, you can look down and see a bit of the street and the canal. There's a houseboat. You can see the end of it. A bargeman lives there with his family. They have a baby and he's just beginning to walk, and I'm so afraid that he's just going to fall in the canal someday. I watch him. Your father spoke of a schedule? Oh, yes. It's mostly about the times we have to be quiet and times for the WC. You can use it now if you like. No, thank you. I suppose you think it's awful, my talking about a thing like that, but you don't know how important it can be, especially when you're frightened. About this room, the way Margot and I did it, she had it to herself in the afternoons for studying, reading lessons, and I took the mornings. Would that be all right with you? I'm not my best in the morning. You stay here in the morning, then. I'll take the room in the afternoons. Tell me, when you're in here, what happens to me? Where am I spending my time? In there? With all the people? Yes. I see, I see. We have supper at 6:30. Then, if you don't mind, I like to lie down quietly for 10 minutes before eating. I find it helps the digestion. Of course. I hope I'm not going to be too much of a bother to you. I seem to be able to get everyone's back up. I always get along very well with children. My patients all bring their children to me because they know I get on well with them, so don't you worry about that. Thank you, Mr. Dussel. Anne writes in her diary, and yesterday I finished Sissy van Marksveld's latest book. I think she is a first-class writer. I shall definitely let my children read her. Monday, the 21st of September, 1942. Mr. Dussel and I had another battle yesterday. Yes, Mr. Dussel. According to him, nothing, I repeat, nothing is right about me. My appearance, my character, my manners. While he was going on at me, I thought, sometime I'll give you such a smack that you'll fly up to the ceiling. Why is it that every grown-up thinks he knows the way to bring up children, particularly the grown-ups that never had any? I keep wishing that Peter was a girl instead of a boy. Then I would have someone to talk to. Margot's a darling, but she takes everything too seriously. To pause for a moment on the subject of Mrs. Von Don, I must tell you that her attempts to flirt with father are getting her nowhere. Pem, thank goodness, won't play.